the next step I've done is to take these strips of plywood, and I've just trimmed them so that they're just wide enough to go under the ledge here. The idea is to just thicken up the ledge a bit. Just makes it look that much more sturdy. More of a cosmetic thing than anything else. Like in the bench itself, you can walk on it, sit on it, crawl on it. You know, it's already strong enough, but it's just kind of an aesthetic thing. I'm going to be putting a face material on later, and that also gives you a little bit more room to work with face material. Now, put this on is really simple. Just run a bead of glue, and then just use an assortment of various clamps to hold it all together. If you don't have clamps, just go down to your local hardware store and buy everything they have on the shelf, because you're going to need all shapes and sizes of them eventually if you get into doing any kind of woodworking. So don't be afraid to buy clamps. You can never have too many clamps. So, but I've got one probably every 6 or 8 inches here along the whole length of the strip, just holding it in place while the glue sets. Leave it for about an hour. After that, it should the glue will hold it there. It'll be every bit as strong as nailing it. So, you know, to put these on is fairly straightforward. Just cut your strip to fit, and then you just take your glue and run a bead all the way along. And once you've got your bead in place, then you just simply lift it up into place and hold it with the clamps. We'll just get lots of glue on there. All the way along. And you just lift it into place, and now that the top is nice and secure, I can sneak my oops, what's going on here? We have an obstacle in the way. Okay. Just have a nail sticking out here. There we go. And since the top is now secure, I can steal my clamps and recycle them. Okay, now that's secured, we turn our attention over to this other section. Okay, now occasionally you're going to run into a circumstance where you cannot get a clamp on because I've got no space above which to hold on to the clamp. Now if you can get in there with a right angle drill, that's one option, but in this case it's even too tight to do that. So what you do instead here is you just glue it up like normal. As soon as we can get some glue, I'm going to have to fill my bottle again. There you go, just now, we'll just set that aside for a moment. What we're going to do, since we can't get in there with a drill and we can't hold it with clamps, what we need to do is just get a couple blocks in there, slip that into place, then take a couple of wood shims and just use the wood shims to lift that up and put pressure on it. Just like so. There, and that's every bit as good as a clamp. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be doing with our countertop is to put the facing material on it. I'm just going with a 1/4 inch hardboard. It has a nice, really smooth surface to it, easy to paint, and you know, it's just a utility cabinet anyway, so I'm not going to do any fancy stuff with it. So, but as usual, I've pre-cut my piece. I've dry fitted. I've made sure it fits just nicely, and now we're going to attach the panel to the sidewall. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to use carpenter's glue, and then we're going to come up with a really creative way to hold this flat against the wall here, because unlike doing the strips under the countertop edge, I don't have really a whole lot of room to put a clamp in, especially at the back here. It's just not going to work. I just don't have a clamp that's 2 feet deep, so we're going to have to come up with another way to hold this piece flat to the surface while the glue sets and dries. So, well, I'm going to use this one here. So we just take our glue and a generous amount on the back here, and everywhere we go, just put enough on so that it can spread out, and we're going to be able to make good contact with the surface here. That should probably do it. There we go. Now, just slip her right up in there. And we'll just push it in, lift it up so it's make it flush all the way around. This probably is not going to stick. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to help it out a bit here. We're going to take a headless pinner, and we're going to pin right at the end here. I like the headless pinner because it's basically invisible. And so now with that in place, now I can put a clamp on the front here. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a 2x4. That'll spread the pressure out a bit. And we're going to clamp that in place. Take another one near the bottom here. Now to clamp the back, we need to be a little more creative. So what we're going to do, I've got this 2x10, we're just going to put that in there, like so. we're just going to put this ladder up against it like so. And then what we're going to do, we're going to take this box of drywall mud and this piece here so things don't fall over. And we're just going to use this pail of chemical to put some pressure on it. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to be a little creative, but it gets the job done. Okay, now while that end is drying and setting, and we've got the clamps on here, I've cleared the countertop off now, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a couple of sanders to it here. I've got a square sander here, palm sander, so I can get into the corners and up against the wall. And for the big area, I've got a belt sander. And basically what I'm going to do, I used just standard spruce plywood to make the top. It's just a utility work top, so it doesn't have to be too fancy. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the high portions off and just smooth it out just a bit. And then once I've got the surface basically smooth and free of you know, big loose chunks of wood or whatever, and then I'm going to take some epoxy and I'm going to seal the surface, and that'll give me a nice hard working surface for doing my work on, and be quite resilient to, you know, to spills and messes and whatever else I do, and it should work out fine. Now, something like this, as always, your safety precautions. Don't forget your mask. You're indoors, even though these things do have dust bags, well, some of them do anyways. It can get to be a little bit dusty, even with a dust collecting bag. So don't forget your safety protection. So anyways, I've cleaned up a bit in here, and we're just continuing on with the rest of our trim. Our end piece there is looking nice, so we're just going to do the rest of the counter the same way. Again, we're just going to glue it and put it in place, and then we're just going to pin it with the pin nailer, and that way we don't have to worry about any heads showing, because they just go right through the material and hold it just nicely. And just like before, we're going to run a bead here, and then we'll just use the pin nailer, and that should be sufficient to hold that. Good idea to dry fit all your pieces. I've already done that, so it just slips right up under there, and voila. Now, one thing with the pin nailer, you have to unlock and then pin it in. Now, don't ever move this while you're pinning. These nailers have an extremely fine gauge little pusher that pushes the pins out, and if you move this nailer while you're nailing, you will bend that little hammer and wreck your gun. That's all there is to that, and you don't even see those pins once they're in there. Just to give you an idea how small these pin nails are, that's a strip of 100 right here. So now that I've finished sanding the countertop here, the next thing I need to do is just take a screwdriver and ensure that all of my screw heads are sunk below the surface of the counter. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some natural wood filler and just going to fill in the little divots here and spread that out with a drywall knife and leave it for 24 hours, and then I'm going to stain it. So I've got fill all my divots here, and also if I've got any cracks or anything along the way, I'm going to fill those, like this one here. I got a little bit of a crack here in the surface. Just work some of the filler into it. Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to be staining the surface here, and then I'll be varithing it with I've got a new kind of varithane that goes on really thick. It's like putting on half a dozen coats at once. So I've decided that's the way I'm going to actually go with this, since they don't sell the plastic coat paint anymore. Environmentalists have gone berserk and forced the government to not allow the sale of certain products anymore. Apparently the plastic coat paint, which would have been wonderful for this, apparently it's got something some volatile organic compounds that apparently aren't too friendly for the environment, is what they claim anyway. Although the stuff's totally inert once it dries, but that's neither here nor there. So finally, I'm going to be finishing off my workbench and the front of my bookshelf with some homemade trim. I've decided, since the top is basically spruce or pine or whatever, fir, that variety of wood, that I'm just going to use standard 2x4s to make my own profiles. And basically what I've done is I've just taken a table saw and ripped 3/8 of an inch off the edge of a 2x4. Now the reason I've ripped it off the edge is because when it comes from the mills now, it's got a nice radius edge right here. So that actually gives me a nice finished look. And otherwise if I was making it completely on my own, I would just simply take a router and do this little bit of a radius edge as well. A little extra work, but it does well. And I'm putting it just on the front edge of the counter. Turn it down so you can see. And I'm putting it just on the front edge of the counter. And remember earlier I made this double 3/4 thickness, so 1.5 inches, and that just happens to be how thick a standard 2x4 is 1.5 inches. So it's going to fit perfectly and look really nice. So just like the other faces down here, we're just going to run a bead of glue down, and then we're going to attach it with the headless pinner. And one thing you're going to want to do before you do that, just make sure this is all nice and smooth sanded if you need to. If you need to, take a small hand planer or whatever you need to do to get the face of this smooth. That way you get a nice tight fit here. it's nice and tight, and when I come along with the filler and the paint, and that'll just blend right in there. One thing I find is handy when you're putting on corners like this is just to have an appropriate profile cut so that you can match up this edge and just make sure that your corner is going to be square once you've got that all in place there. So that's going to be not too bad there. Put my glue on, and then I'll so I want to have actually more on the top here. Let's run another bead here. And a small bead up there. There we go. Make sure that's nice and tight. And then we can pin her home. Anyways, now that the sanding has all been done and we're sheening our tabletop, basically just spread, put your stain out, and then just roll it out and let it sit for about 15 minutes, and then you just wipe it down and let it dry and cure. Once it dries and cures, then you can cover it with a plastic coating or several layers of varnish or whatever you can get your hands on. So I would have loved to have had a plastic coating, but I'm going to have to settle for varnish since that's all that seems to be available these days. So. I find this is probably the easiest way to do a big area like this. I'm not worried about the wall behind because that's going to be having a trim go up against there, and that'll cover anything that's immediately at the countertop level. So just run your roller one way and run the roller back the other way and just cover the whole thing. Let it soak in. Well, orders to this stage. Just make sure you get an even coat on everything, and once it's soaked in for about 15 minutes, then just wipe up the excess. So once it's sat for about 15 or 20 minutes, just take yourself a cloth and then just start wiping off the excess and rubbing it in, and you'll find it comes to a nice nice little finish there. You got the excess off. So anyways, now that the stain is finally dried and everything, the last thing I need to do is put on my coat of polyurethane. I'm using this one coat stuff. It's thicker than a regular polyurethane, so theoretically you're only supposed to do one cut or one coat. So we'll just do that and get this job out of the way, and then we can get on to the next part of our project, which will be the floor. And this room is, once we get the floor on, this room is done. So, and we can move in. So move-in day is fast approaching. This is one of the new water-based polyurethane coatings here, so It's a creamy white color when you put it on, and then it supposedly it dries to a gloss. So we'll see. But one of the nice things they claim about it is it cleans up with soap and water instead of needing messy solvents to do the job. So one thing I like to do is always use a nailer that's appropriate to the size of trim that I'm putting on. Now I've got this 1x4 trim that I'm putting on the back here. This is something that I've custom cut. I've put a bevel on it, a bevel on the end here, and trimmed it down. And that was just a 1x4 that I started out with, but made it into a nice piece of trim now. And because it's a larger piece of trim, I'm going to be using a larger nailer gun for it. In this case, an 18 or 16 gauge brad nailer. Whereas something like that little corner piece there, I would just use a little 23 gauge pin nailer, because that doesn't need a whole lot of support, and besides you get a little piece like that with a big nailer, you're probably going to split it. Now with putting the trim on here, you want to try and get to where the studs are. Now I know for a fact, since I did the wiring in the room, that my outlets are all on this side of the stud. So if I go right in here and go just to the left of that outlet, I'm going to hit the stud perfectly, just like so. Bingo. Now, the next stud, of course, will be 16 inches over. Now, another thing I also know is that because I brought all my wiring in from overhead, I don't have to worry about hitting any wires. And finally, one other advantage to pre-painting everything is you're going to get this nice clean edge along where the trim goes. You'll never get that with trying to tape it off. This is just a perfectly clean edge, and that really looks sharp.